Sick and Tired Part 1 is a really interesting episode of The Golden Girls. This is the first episode of the 5th season. It's directed by Terry Hughes, and as always there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode and share some thoughts. And I'll go through things chronologically. It starts off with establishing the subplot because Blanche wants to write a novel. She wants to be one of the great southern novelists, which, speaking as a writer, as a novelist, I think that is a really brilliant venture, and if it's something Blanche wants to do, she should absolutely go for it. And I have a few thoughts along the way. The main narrative focuses on the fact that Dorothy has been unwell for about 5 months. She thought it was the flu, but it's just still there. It's still hanging around, and it doesn't seem like it's the flu. So she goes to see a doctor. This is Dr. Stevens, played by Jeffrey Tambor, and he tells her, "You're fine," which is what other doctors have said to her. And they're kind of not arguing necessarily, but they're having a bit of a not pleasant conversation where Dorothy won't listen to him. Understandably, she doesn't feel right, so she's not going to just listen and take his word for it when she knows within herself that she doesn't feel right. And he's not listening to her because he, as the professional, knows that there's nothing wrong with her. So obviously they both think that their perspective is correct. Of course, the big question is the doctor right? Is Dorothy right? We'll come back to that, well, in a second. And Dorothy happens to mention the King of England, to which the doctor replied, "England doesn't have a king," which, just watching this in 2025 is pretty funny. And Dr. Stevens basically says that she's just lonely and she's unhappy, and it's just a physical manifestation of that. And yes, fair enough, that could be the case, but I kind of feel like that doesn't solve anything, and also that's just the doctor's guess. There's obviously nothing to confirm that that's what the problem is, but there's nothing obvious that's causing Dorothy's symptoms. So the doctor's just going, well, it must just be this. So I can understand why Dorothy would be really frustrated with that, and she doesn't accept it as her diagnosis. We're then back at the house, and they're barbecuing, and Rose just says, as if out of nowhere, "We never had a barbecue in St. Olaf after the tragedy." What tragedy? They take the bait. Rose tells the story, kind of. And then Blanche says that she's having writer's block, she's not written anything, and Dorothy made me laugh, because she said, "Blanche, you have to have written to have writer's block, otherwise all of us have it." Which is a fair point, although I will say, there are plenty of times when I've opened up that Word document, I've got all of my notes ready, I know what I want to write, and the words don't come. I will say, for me, and I think it's probably a common experience, those first couple of paragraphs, while you can still see white space on the page, that's terrifying. Once you're several pages in and you can see a lot of words in front of you, it's no longer as daunting. But I can definitely understand why Blanche hasn't known where to start. She had a lot of small ideas. There are little phrases that she liked that she wants to write down, but she hasn't found her way to begin it. And honestly, my advice to Blanche, and to anybody who wants to write but can't get that opening chapter down, write a different chapter, write a different paragraph. You don't have to start at the beginning when you're writing your first draft. And I think if Blanche just decided to write the bits that she was passionate about, let's be honest, the hotter scenes are clearly what Blanche is wanting to write about. She should just write about those and then worry about the beginning later. But that's just me putting in my 2 cents worth as a writer. But I really liked this subplot, and the main narrative's great as well. Dorothy ends up going to New York to visit a doctor, and she goes with Rose, which is nice to have Rose's support. And the doctor tells her there, and I hated this, he asked her how she got there, and she said she flew, she got a taxi from the airport, she walked from the taxi, well, to the hotel presumably first, but then to his doctor's office she walked, and the doctor said to her that she's not sick because she could walk. How disgusting is that? And I don't know if it's a problem with this doctor or if it's a problem of its time. I feel like even today there will be medical professionals who can say, well, you can walk, so you're fine. Hopefully few and far between. But I don't know if this was a common attitude at the time or if it's just this particular doctor. If anybody knows, please feel free to share. And Dorothy, back at the hotel, got really upset. Rose was talking about King Kong and obviously getting excited about New York, and Dorothy starts crying. And what I love about this is that Rose was, I mean, it's going to sound mean when I say it, but Rose was saying to her, "You are sick." And obviously that sounds mean, but she was supporting Dorothy. She was saying, "I believe you. It's not just in your head." And then she started talking about Dr. Zeus. So the trip there to Dr. Budd, played by Michael McGuire, was not successful either. And we're back in the kitchen for the final scene, and it's honestly so dramatic. And part of me thinks this should have been the season finale. The previous season finale was it was fine. It was not great, but it was okay. But at the end of this episode, Sophia says to the others that Dorothy could have an illness, there's just not a name for it. And she has a valid point. For every medical condition that exists, once upon a time, doctors didn't have a name for it. They didn't have a term for this particular collection of symptoms. And Sophia suggests that maybe that's what Dorothy is experiencing. She's experiencing this collection of symptoms that don't currently point to a specific medical diagnosis, and that's because it hasn't got a name yet. And that's a scary thought. And she ends the episode by saying Dorothy could be dying and they just don't know. That's a way to end an episode, and I really think it should have been the season finale, because that would have been a really dramatic, really powerful way to end the previous season that would have made me so desperate, irritatingly desperate to watch the next episode. And I'm genuinely curious to find out what's wrong with Dorothy. I have absolutely no idea. I don't know if they're going to go with the direction of actually it is in your head because of these reasons, or, you know, for example, it could be a physical manifestation of anxiety, but she doesn't know it, but then we could unravel what's causing her this anxiety. So maybe the first doctor was slightly correct, but maybe not quite hitting the nail on the head. Or is Dorothy correct and there is something wrong? Does she have a virus? Does she have an underlying condition? Are they going to go really dark and give her a serious, life-threatening illness that requires surgery to treat? I hope not. I know that if they do, they'll do a good job of delivering important information while still making it funny, but I genuinely don't know what is wrong with Dorothy, which I guess is kind of the point of the episode, and I cannot wait to watch the next episode. I will watch it in about 4 or 5 days based on my schedule, and honestly, I cannot wait. So looking forward to finding out, but had this been a season finale, it would have been very, very powerful, and ultimately, I don't think it needs to be said, but I'll say it anyway. Sick and Tired Part 1 is a brilliant episode of The Golden Girls. It's a little emotional. There's definitely comedy in there, and I cannot wait to find out what happens next. Obviously, I hope for the best for Dorothy. And if I were to make a prediction, I'd predict... I don't know. I genuinely don't know, because whatever they do, it's going to be a bit awkward. I think it's going to be some kind of illness that's maybe quite rare, but not life-threatening. That would make the most sense. I hope it's not a serious illness. I don't think it's a physical manifestation of a mental health problem. But it could be. They could absolutely go down that route to raise awareness of that. So, honestly, I can't speculate anymore because I don't know, and the only way to find out is to watch it. So, looking forward to that. And for now, I can sum up by saying that Sick and Tired Part 1 is a really fantastic episode of The Golden Girls.